We're talking with NoWayItsJ about his Nine Moons Invitational decks. The first deck we start off with is the Lilith Blight Chaser deck you decided to bring. Could you kind of describe the general strategy of this deck and why you made some of the card choices that you did?
Um, so originally, before I brought this deck, I saw Kalos using a version of it, and it seemed really good. Like Cryptographer with the Bloodborne spell, Lilith's Bloodborne spell, it's really good. Like you can get four Wraithlings, and two of them are 3/3s, and that's really good. The thing that I differentiated from me and Kalos's list, though, is I put Deathfire Crescendo for like more basically auto win conditions. Early on, if I can't get Variax, because his version relies strictly on Variax, I think, and so I want to make sure I have more win conditions. It's really good. Basically, you just try to get a Feroso snowball turn where you go Feroso Cryptographer and summon a bunch of Wraithlings, and then Dark sacrifice Variax on 5 mana, and yeah, it's a Variax reliant deck.
It's Variax reliant. That's
Yep.
what you said. Okay. So from the new cards, you seem to incorporate a fair amount of them. So a lot of it seems to be based around buffing the Wraithlings, and but kind of playing with a less of a 1/1 Wraithling game and more of it buffing them into larger minions. Do you think this helps it avoid a lot of the AOE clear that kind of Wraithlings were running into before?
Yeah, definitely. Like the combo I talked about, Cryptographer. You could get 2/3/3, so even Tempest can't clear it. And uh, the only other AOE people really run is Scorn. Um, so yeah, I think it's really good.
Okay. And I think that's this is a pretty standard deck. You actually only went with two Spectral Revenants. Do you think now that Abyssian has more late game options in the Grandmaster, we're going to see less of an auto include three Spectral Revenant in every Abyssian deck, or is this just kind of a experimental choice you're making here?
In cheat decks, like Flash Reincarnation or Sacrifice, I think, or why am I talking about Flash? But like decks of Sacrifice that you can cheat out Variax, I think it's really good to run three instead of Revenant since it wins games more often when you cheat it out. But in Cassava, I think three Revenant's more consistent because you Sacrifice isn't as consistent in Cassava.
Okay. Okay. For your next deck, we have a Mech Fey deck that is actually only the only new card you're running here is the Concealing Shroud. And you're running a pretty standard mech list. Other than that, it only has two chassis, which seems to be the standard cut if you're going to cut one mech. What about this kind of mech shell? Do you think makes it one of the more viable choices?
Um, so something I've been running for the last like month or two that I haven't seen anyone else do is I'm running Frostfires along with Snow Chaser that I popularized like a few months ago because Snow Chaser with Gravity Well and Wings is one of the most oppressive openers turn one. Like you go Wings, Snow Chaser, then your opponent can't do anything the rest of the game to pressure you from playing back. So I think Frostfire to further the Snow Chaser pressure is really strong. And on top of that, it makes your cannons even more deadly. Like you go against Magmar, they can't clear it. You crossfire it, and then you just kill everything 5 damage every turn. So yeah, I think it's just a really overall good deck. It's kind of cheesy. That's why I run Shroud, so I can't get cheese back. So I think it's one of the most amazing cheese decks out there. You can kill them really fast. You auto win versus decks that aren't prepared for it, and you don't lose the aggro, which used to be its only weakness.
Right. How do you feel about the Shroud? Have you found that people are going to have to run more Dispel in order to counter it, or do you just find that it often just gives you an extra turn because they just don't have any way to remove the effect?
It's often just another turn to stall out mech, but the bonus part of it in this deck is that your opponent can't dispel it if they unless they have lethal. So because they have to dispel mech. So if they dispel mech, then you play this. Later on, they can't dispel it because they don't have it anymore. So it's either choose mech or choose to kill me later on. I just think it's a really good card.
Right. And you choose not to run. Well, you're choosing to run Faye as opposed to Kara. Do you think Kara's Bloodborne spell is just a bit too weak, even with the kind of the less powerful mech minions that it's sometimes used to kind of make a little bit more formidable? Or do you think Faye just has a very strong Bloodborne spell that's just kind of overshadows what you get from Kara at this point?
Before Shroud came out, I thought they were both about tied. I thought Kara was a tiny bit better because the 9/9 mech is really good. Um, but after Shroud came out, Fade's a little bit better, I think, because you get 2 guaranteed damage after that in the late game or whenever you use Shroud. Whereas Kara, you don't really get anything out of your extra turn to use. So right now with Shroud, I think Fade's better.
Right now that the ability doesn't stack. And you choose to go with Hailstone instead of something like Aspect of the Fox. Is there any particular reason for that, or is that just a metagame choice? And what is it about the metagame that makes you lean towards something that's slightly more expensive in a deck that often wants to be playing out all its mana full of mechs when it can?
Well, regardless of meta, I think a mech deck should focus like strictly on mech. So it's just more consistency. Like I run Sojourner instead of Elkian because it draws into mechs. I run Hailstone because I could Hailstone my own mechs to play them again. But it's also just a really good tempo card versus slower decks like Variax or whatever.
Oh, I didn't realize you could actually Hailstone your own mechs. That's a
Yeah.
pretty cute combo. Does that come up often, or is that just kind of a fringe consideration?
Yeah, it comes up pretty often. Anytime I have a helm, I usually just leave it in the corner all game so I can Hellstone it later.
Really? Yeah, I found that with mech decks, the number of helms and wings you draw is kind of the biggest indicator of if you're gonna get that mech out in a reasonable time frame because they're effective 1 mana most of the time.
Yeah.
So other than that, seems pretty standard. Just adding one of the new cards. You choose not to go with any Spirit of the Wild. Do you think that's just a bit too expensive now at 5 mana and just doesn't add a ton to the mech deck? Kind of concealing Shroud buys you the turn instead of having to attack on the same turn. Is that kind of the logic behind that exclusion?
Oh, that's a good question. I've been wanting to talk about that card in Mech for a long time. It's ever since, even when it was like 4 mana, I never thought it was that great because versus good players, like all my tournament games I play Mech, I usually have to play it on my side of the map because if I play it on theirs, they can just dispel it, Grovekeeper it, or whatever. So to protect it, you usually have to play it on your side. And rushing it out for eight damage usually isn't that consistent because you usually don't get crazy hands to be able to Spirit of the Wild and Mech the same turn early on. So especially with 5 mana now, I think it's too costly to be consistent, and I don't think you should really be playing Mech on the other side of the board most of the time.
Okay. And just one other thing, just kind of about mech in general. Is there you don't seem to have much of a backup plan, so to speak. So if your mech were to get destroyed, if like you're unable to protect it, and they're able to Grovekeeper it, or dispel it with Sunbloom, or Chromatic Cold, which is something you can't really protect against in a lot of ways. What does this deck win in that case? Does it have a backup plan, or are you mostly just all in on the Mechazor plan in a deck like this that tops out at the chassis and doesn't really have any other late game threats? Is it ever worth it to include kind of an alternate win condition, or just the consistency of getting the mech on time just a better thing, even if you kind of spew some games when it gets answered in a way you can't avoid?
Um, before Gravity Well got buffed, I used to run Pandora's as alternate win condition, but now that Gravity Well's out, it's so good a Snow Chaser. I basically run an alternate win condition before I play Mech rather than after. So like, say for example, I play Gravity Well or wins Snow Chaser, they're forced to dispel the Snow Chaser, so it basically gives me my Mech more safety. So yeah, I don't really have an alternate win condition, but I play more early games to force them to not answer my mech later. Also, Faye is kind of a win condition in itself, but yeah, if they answer mech, I kind of am in a bad spot.
Right. I mean, you do kind of have that ticking clock from the Bloodborne spell. So you seem to just, you're trying to put your mech plan in the largest position to win, and then if that, plan misses for whatever reason, you just accept that you lose percentages if the mech gets answered in exchange for having, a higher percentage of games where you effectively deploy Mechazords, is what it seems to be. The
Yes.
Okay, okay. Just wanted to, and I think you have another mech deck. This is the Starhorn one. It's also
Yeah.
kind of a Starhorn mech slash Decimus card draw burn deck, so it's kind of a hybrid of the new archetype that we're seeing with the is it Rise of the Bloodborne spell? Rise of the Bloodborne? New expansion.
I think so.
Yes,
Yeah.
so we're close enough. So why did you decide to kind of combine these shells together? And what do you think the mech package adds that the regular aggressive package didn't really provide?
Um. So versus Cassava, they just play Kaleno versus aggro and they basically win. So with that in mind, I put mechs in because Cassava or Lilith have a really tough time dealing with mech. They usually don't run anything other than Shroud, maybe Lightbender, and they usually can't even get in range to dispel it if you place it properly. Um, but on top of that, the deck plays super similarly to aggro no matter what you put in it after you put in Tectonic and the 4 damage 2 mana spell. After that, it doesn't really matter what you put, so it's still basically the same face deck. So I just put mechs for more Cassava win conditions.
Yeah, it's
Um,
the Entropic Gaze, I think, is the 4 damage spell you're referring to.
yeah, and I think I love this deck though. I think it's a bit better than Phase mech, but in a different way. Like Phase has a super safe mech, whereas this one makes your opponent unsafe. Like if they kill mech, you just die because they have so much out of hand. But with Faye, you just never your mech doesn't die.
Right. I mean, you definitely have the alternative win condition in the 7 mana Decimus Tectonic Spikes combo, and then you also have a lot of burn, and you have Tigers plus Thumping Wave, so you can definitely win in addition to the mech plan. It's not as reliant. You choose not to run Macantor or Mandrake, which are usually pretty close to staples in every magma deck, and especially in minion heavy decks. So what makes those cards not necessary in this type of build? What makes you kind of shy away from those?
Um, I used to think Mandrake was an auto include in every Magmar deck before that expansion, but now the deck is just so fast. You don't. The games end before you even get to 6 mana. Like even Flash Mecantor isn't that great compared to like Flash Decimus. So I think games just end too fast for them.
They just even too slow for the current metagame. And you have Kajuta,
Yeah.
Kajuta I think is how I always pronounce it, in a deck that doesn't really run expensive minions. Is that just so you can kind of spew out mechs as quickly as possible? What was the reasoning behind the inclusion of Kajuta? Because you don't really have a lot of synergies that go with the kind of a masochism, pain, damage type thing.
I like using. I like having at least 11 2 drops or playable turn 1 plays. So it's a 10th and 11th one without relying on Flash. Um, so since I wanted more 2 drops, I wanted something that helps mech more, and this helps ramp mech a lot faster. Like I didn't think it would be that big of a deal, but when you play a 1 mana mech, it gets crazy. Like you play it on tile, you play Helm, wings on a mana tile, then you play cannon in the back, and you have 4 minions and 3 mechs already. So I think it gets pretty crazy. And then you just Tectonic later on.
Right, yeah, getting Helms actually seems when I actually tried this deck out a little bit, and Helm seemed very good with it because it is a 1 mana minion that still survives the Kajuta damage and can basically act kind of like the slow or the ray in those decks where it can help you ramp on early turns. Um, so I found it effective in some of those cases. And again, you're choosing to run just two chassis. I still don't know. Is that seems to be kind of common in your mech decks? Is that what you see as kind of the standard mech package? Is just including two of those? Is there ever a consideration for just throwing in the third one or cutting down more of those? What's kind of the reasoning behind that two number? Is it just the mana cost is too high for it to really be played in multiples?
Um, I usually try to run as many mechs as I can. If I could run three, I probably will. But the deck space is so tight, like I don't want to cut anything for a third one. And two is consistent enough, I think.
Okay. So and then for your last deck, which will only be used if you make the finals, where we'll go to best of seven, we have uh, a kind of a Zurich's artifact, time Maelstrom gifts combo type deck, with I think a lot of interesting choices. So what's the overall game plan of this deck, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the cards a little bit deeper, I think.
Yeah. So this is a OTK Vitruvian list. It's a deck Macer used a long time ago in about like December last year, and it's really good. It hasn't been good for a long time until this 6 mana spell came up, but this makes it a lot more consistent. Like the problem it used to have was that you usually would only have one artifact to play the combo with, and that usually wasn't enough damage. It's only like 15 damage, I think. But with this, after you have Judicator with it, you could do like a 6 mana OTK. You play this after Adjudicator, it's 5 mana, so you get two artifacts, and you play Roar of Tears. Um, and even Time Maelstrom, if you get it discounted, it's even more. So I think with the 6 mana spell, it gets kind of crazy. It's really good. And then I play Ray or whatever
Right.
uh, for more like kind of auto wins. Like some games you just win the game because you play a 4 mana Nimbus on turn two. So it's just there for more cheese.
Okay. So yeah, just talking about some of the the less common cards. You have the Adjudicator, which is the 3 mana 3/1 that reduces all the spells in your hand by one. All spells, not doesn't include minions. So this is just to kind of enable your combo and accelerate, as far as I can tell. That's the general idea, is to draw some of your combo in hand and then try to reduce the cost with
Yeah, it makes
this.
it faster instead of like a 7 or 8 mana combo from the 6 mana spell plus two Aurora Stairs, it turns into a 5 mana combo. So it speeds it up like 2 or 3 turns.
Okay. So this isn't something you're gonna run out early. Then you want to wait until you have the spells in hand, because this really enables your combo. Or are you gonna play the body out as a tempo play? How is your usual play pattern with this?
I think you should at least have two combo pieces before you play this. Otherwise, I would probably replace it. But the exception would be sometimes if you don't really have Nimbus or something on your 5 mana play, you can play Adjudicator. So next turn, if you had the 6 mana spell in your hand, you can play that on your 5 mana turn, and then you have a pretty good 5 mana turn. But other than that, usually want to save it for more combos.
Okay, and yeah, the next one, Artifact Hunter, which this draws an artifact from your deck, right?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the 4 mana 3/3 that will draw an artifact from your deck, and the only artifact you have is the Staff of Yakir, we'll call it, which is the 2 mana add 2 attack. So you didn't go for the Hex Blades, or the Blast out of the Ankh, I think it is. So you're very much just trying to increase the attack damage as mana efficiently as possible, is what it seems. So this is always going to draw the staff for you.
Yep. I want my combos to be as cheap as possible, so 2 mana artifact makes it the best for that.
Right.
And
What are you saying?
Artifact Hunter is really good in combo decks, so I think it's really underrated for decks like this because it adds a lot of consistency. You don't have to pray that you draw into it or pray that you draw the 6 mana card and get the right artifacts. You could just always. It's basically a fourth and fifth staff.
Okay. And now, are you going to play your artifact out, or is it usually played the turn of the combo? Because you can't reduce that cost with Adjudicator, as far as I know. So is that going to be something you play out, ahead of time and use to help control the board, or is that only going to be used when it's time to combo?
Well, you have such good minions in Vitruvi, and you can play it out for tempo sometimes. Like, if you could kill a Rejuvenator or something and get a tempo lead, you just play a regular game with Nimbus and Aymara. Um, and versus, like, Magmar or uh, Vitruvian too. You can play this out unless they run Rush's Curse. But versus Vitruvian and Magmar generally, you could just play it out and they can't clear it. So I think it's pretty good to play versus those factions, or if you just want to play a normal game.
Okay, and I think kind of the something that's pretty notable too is that using Xerix instead of Saj, who is normally the choice of general when you go towards artifact based decks. What's kind of the idea behind this is I think most artifact combos we've seen recently have been using Saj. So what's kind of your thinking behind wanting to have the Dervish Bloodborne spell as opposed to the doubling minion damage?
I don't think Saj is that great in this meta right now. Most of the decks are pretty fast, or their minions don't really care. Like, well, they don't care enough for you to face take like 7 damage if you face take a meltdown. So I just don't think she's worth it. And Saj, whenever you do play the normal games, you don't always play the normal games. Most of the time it's the combo, but when you do, Xerix is better for that. It gives you more board pressure. Yeah, I just don't think Saj is that great right now.
Okay, so he just kind of plays into your backup plan a little bit more, um,
Yeah.
and just kind of lets you play some game if you don't have the combo. And you're also not including like Falkius or anything, which kind of boosts your attack and protects your artifacts if you need to run them out early. Is that just because he's hard to play on the same turn you combo, so the buff doesn't help you as much, or what's kind of the reason for excluding what's usually seen as a pretty close to auto include in pretty much all Vitruvian decks?
Falcius is pretty good.
Falsius.
I usually look at him as a 4 damage removal, though. He could be used in the combo, but usually you want your combos to involve the 6 mana spell.
Like the
So
gifts.
yeah, it just costs too much mana, I think, for the combo. And as a normal like card you play, I don't think it's worth the spot to take out like anything else when you want to play a normal game. So yeah, I just think it's not worth it for normal games or the combo.
Okay, so yeah, you
In
kind
this
of
deck anyway.
you have to balance the considerations in the deck between, giving yourself strength in the times where you don't draw the combo, and then also having the consistency of that combo and making sure that works when you need it to work. So just I'm sorry, I'm sure you've gone over this, but just the combo, the way it plays out usually is that you play a staff or gifts, and then you're going to buff your attack with aura tears, 1 or 2 times, which is going to give you between 4 and 6 bonus damage for your general. And then you're going to reactivate it with Time Storm. Are you generally aiming to deal the full 25, or what's the average amount of damage you can deal with the combo? When you get it off.
So the normal amount of damage that you can normally pull off is about like 16 to 18. Normally, that's when you don't like draw crazy. When you draw crazy, you could just do 25. But normally you do 16 to 18. So with Amara or just hitting them with your general every turn, they're usually at about 18 or lower. So you could usually pull it off that on them most of the time. If not, you just kind of hope that if they're like playing super safe, they're at 25. You just kind of hope that you can Daymar them for 5 and then kill them with a Time Maelstrom combo.
Right. And just one other card is you have Nimbus, who is usually was kind of comes in and out of the metagame, and usually when it's excluded, it's kind of the reason cited is that it's too slow. And you've mentioned this is a very fast metagame. Is there any other 5 drop that you considered there, or what's the reasoning for Nimbus over something that might give you a little bit more immediate board impact, or even something like Grincher, which would maybe give you a cheap artifact that could help enable your combo?
In this deck with Ray, I think it's just too good. I think it's the best 5 drop in the game if you can cheat it out early. Like if you play this on turn 2, your opponent can't do anything basically. Like especially when the meta is so dominated by Abyssian, they don't have any way to deal with this properly. Like they could ping it and then punish, but then you still get an obelisk. They could blur it away, but then you still get an obelisk, and you still have the body. So it's just really good against Abyssian, and it's the best minion to cheat out.
Okay, so that's just something that's going to try to play into your, your more normal game plan, or try to steal wins if you can accelerate it. It seems like a lot of your decks, are kind of designed to have kind of an auto win condition, just something that will, make it very difficult for your opponent to, kind of play a fair game against. Is there a reason you choose to kind of include, kind of decks that seem to include some type of gimmick? What about the metagame makes you want to kind of lean towards those rather than just kind of like a straight up value type of game in a lot of cases?
I usually just like having this. I usually just like having auto win in my deck, so even if something goes wrong, I get a bad hand or whatever, I can still win a game out of nowhere. It's just a nice feeling to have that you have all these different win conditions, and especially when it's something like Ray, where it's not that big of a deal. Like it's still a decent card to like against Songhai, you can just spell anything they play, and it's always good. So I just always like having it, so they just don't ever feel comfortable against me.
Okay, so you just just even the threat of you being able to win out of nowhere makes your opponent kind of alter their game plan and doesn't allow them to kind of play their straight up game plan. Is that kind of the
Yeah,
reason?
and in Dolus, there's so many decks that try to like cheese you, so you kind of want to out cheese them some games. So yeah,
Okay, you want to be able to fight kind of the the unfair game plans with your own unfair game plan. Okay, well
yeah,
thank you so much for explaining your decks. This is actually recorded before the tournament, but so good luck in the tournament. We won't be showing this to anybody before the tournament, so you can kind of have your element of surprise when people see this Zurich's deck come out. Hopefully in the finals. So thank you so much, and hopefully you have a good run.